All right, let's talk about a piece of tech that's probably running in the background of your life right now, without you even knowing it. We're going to pull back the curtain on something called MongoDB and figure out how it brings some serious order to the chaos of our modern digital world. Let's jump in. Okay, first things first, let's just wrap our heads around the scale of the problem. Every single day, we create about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. That's a 25 with 17 zeros after it. And that number is just getting bigger, faster. It's an absolute tsunami of information. So that leads to the big question, right? How on earth do we manage that? How do we deal with this constant, overwhelming flood of information? Because, the tools we used to have, well, they're starting to buckle under the pressure. And that brings us to the old way of doing things. For decades, the tools we had were total workhorses, super reliable. But they're now facing a problem they were just never designed for: the incredible size and the sheer messiness of today's data. For the longest time, the digital world pretty much ran on what we call relational databases. You've probably heard of names like MySQL or SQL Server. They were the absolute bedrock for countless apps, giving us a really structured, really reliable way to store everything. The main idea here is actually pretty simple. In a relational database, all your data has to fit perfectly into these tables with rows and columns that you define ahead of time. The best way to picture it is like a super, super strict spreadsheet. You have to decide up front, this column is only for names, this one is only for dates, and this one is only for numbers. And every single thing you add has to follow those rules, no exceptions. It's incredibly organized for sure, but all that organization means you lose a ton of flexibility. So what happens when your data doesn't fit into those neat little boxes? When things are messy? Well, that's exactly where a whole new philosophy had to come in, leading to the rise of what we now call NoSQL. NoSQL, and by the way, that stands for not only SQL. It isn't one specific product you can go buy. It's a totally different way of thinking about data. It was basically born from the need to handle the craziness of modern apps, just massive amounts of messy, unstructured data that spread all over the place on tons of different servers. And here's the difference in a nutshell. The old SQL databases have that rigid structure, and to handle more traffic, you have to keep buying a bigger, more powerful server. That's called scaling up. But NoSQL databases, they're flexible, and they scale out. You just add more and more cheap servers to the team. It's like the difference between building one giant, impossibly tall skyscraper versus building a whole sprawling city of smaller buildings. So this new way of thinking needed a champion, a hero to lead the charge. And that's exactly where MongoDB comes into the story. It's become one of the most popular, most powerful examples of this whole NoSQL approach. Now, MongoDB's journey didn't happen overnight. It all started way back in 2007. The real turning point, though, was in 2009 when it went open source, which just lit a fire under its development. By 2017, it had grown into the publicly traded tech giant we know today. So how does this thing actually work? Well, first, take that idea of the strict spreadsheet we talked about and just throw it out the window. Instead, MongoDB uses these flexible things called collections and documents. So think of a collection like a big digital filing cabinet. Let's say this cabinet is for users. Inside that cabinet, each document is just a file for one single user. And here's the magic. One user's file might just have a name and an email, but the very next file could have a name, email, shipping address, and a list of their last 10 favorite movies, all living happily together in the same filing cabinet. Here's a quick little cheat sheet to help translate. What the old SQL world called a table, MongoDB calls a collection. A single row in that table is now a flexible document, and a column is just called a field. It's just a new set of words for a much more flexible world. So, we get the basic concept, but what really gives MongoDB its edge? What are its key superpowers? Let's take a look. It really all boils down to three main things. You've got flexibility, scalability, and of course, performance. Let's break each of those down. First up, flexibility. This is that schemaless idea we just touched on. Because one document can look totally different from the next, developers can evolve their applications really fast without having to tear down and rebuild the entire database every time. For teams trying to move quickly, that is an absolute game changer. Second superpower, scalability. MongoDB's secret weapon for this is a process called sharding. It's brilliant. Imagine your data is a gigantic book that's way too heavy for one person to carry. Sharding automatically rips that book into chapters and hands each chapter to a different person. As the book gets longer, you just hire more people. It means you can just keep adding more cheap servers to handle more data, which allows for almost infinite growth. And third, let's talk about raw performance. MongoDB is just built for speed, especially when it comes to writing new data. Think about apps that have to capture a ton of information instantly, like every single like on a social media feed, or data streaming from thousands of smart sensors. MongoDB can gobble up thousands of these records in the blink of an eye. Okay, the theory is cool, but where is this stuff actually being used? The answer might surprise you. It's pretty much everywhere. I'm willing to bet you recognize a few of these names. Yeah, we're talking about some of the biggest companies on the planet. From tech titans like Google and Adobe to global brands like Toyota and Forbes, they all rely on MongoDB to run really critical parts of their businesses. It really is the hidden engine behind so much of what we do every day. It's in the Internet of Things, it's in countless mobile apps on your phone, and it's in systems that demand real-time data, like tracking live sports stats or watching the stock market tick by tick. But if you really want a mind-blowing example of just how much this thing can handle, look at this. India's Aadhaar project. It's the largest biometric database on planet Earth, holding records for over 1.5 billion people. And a core part of the system that makes it all work? You guessed it, MongoDB. It is hard to even imagine a more intense stress test for scalability. So this is why when developers are up against modern data challenges, MongoDB is so often the tool they reach for. Whether they're staring down a mountain of data, they need lightning-fast speed, or they're working with information that's just messy and always changing, MongoDB gives them a really powerful, flexible answer. And that leaves us with one final, pretty fascinating question to chew on. As our digital world keeps getting more and more complex and that data tsunami just keeps on growing, are these flexible document-based databases like MongoDB going to become the new foundation for everything? It's a powerful thought to consider.